Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL Strategy Show Marathon Matchups Edition, as we like to call it here. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, Matt Savoca. We're doing this every week. Follow the man at Draftaholic on Twitter. Hit me up at Loughy_D. Twitter handles right below our heads. And go say hello. Anyway, we're happy to have you with us. We've got 13 games to cover. No bye weeks for week 4 because you got the 17-week season. Bye weeks don't begin actually until week 6, I think. So, or maybe it's 5. I don't know. 5, 6.
No, I think you're correct. Week 6.
6, right?
Year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and you're seeing them pushed off. And then, Matt, I swear there's bye weeks in like week 15.
Yeah, at least 14 for sure, which I know some fantasy playoffs start by week 14 in season-long leagues. And even some DFS tournaments, I think, still start at week 14. I think the Colts and the Patriots are 2 week 14 teams we got to look out for.
Okay, so you're probably maybe week 4. Yeah, you're right. Week 14 is the last one. Eagles, Patriots, Dolphins, and Colts. So okay, week 6 is 4 teams. Week 7 is 6 teams. Damn. All right. Well, that's going to change things. We'll have a few less games to talk about. Might not take all of the allotted time, but I'm glad to do this anyway. Hopefully, you guys are ready to buckle up and hang out. And also, if there's only one place you can go each week, if there's only one time you have and you're busy and you don't have time for any of this, but there's one time you have to really drill down on some research heading into Sunday, well, you're in the right place because we're going to hit on everything and really get into the weeds with each of these games and help you come out of this one feeling like you know a lot more than you did before we started. So anyway, hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Greatly appreciated. It helps us a ton here. And if you like these shows, well, you know, it's the simplest thing to do. And subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 60K. We're less than 100 away from hitting that 60,000 mark. Thanks to you guys. If you like this content, you know, subscribe. If you don't, and you've realized that it's just an awful decision that you stumbled across this channel and now you regret the decision and wish that we never came into your lives, don't subscribe. You never have to hear from us again. But if you want more of this and you want to hang out from day to day, well, subscribe and we'll see you back here tomorrow and tonight and this afternoon. All right, Matt, you ready to do this?
Yeah, let's buckle up. Let's dig in.
Let's do it. Indianapolis at Miami. We'll kick it off with that one. The Miami Dolphins, 1.5-point favorites, 42.5-point total. This feels just like a neutral game script type of spot for both teams. You've got Gaskin and Jonathan Williams, neither of whom have been particularly impressive this season. But on one side, Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor leads the league in goal line attempts with 6, but has 0 touchdowns. And on the other side, Myles Gaskin hasn't been wildly effective, and they've been in some really negative game scripts over the last couple or in 2 weeks. But he's outtouched Malcolm Brown 43-17. So I'd love to start with the run game and just get your take on what you expect from these guys in week 4.
I mean, sure. Like, as you just said, this is not one of the more appetizing game environments that we project
42.5 total.
Weekend. The total is incredibly low here. So we do suspect that there's going to be plenty of usage from these 2 running backs. But do we expect ceiling performances, had to have it kind of games here? It's really hard to tell. Now, with Jonathan Taylor, I should say it leans towards no with both of these players, but it's hard to tell if any of them have a real chance here. With Jonathan Taylor, as you mentioned, the goal line carries and the problems he's had there it's just the start of his issues here. -5 fantasy points under expected per game to start the season. That's outside the top 50 running backs. And that's all while being top 10 in expected fantasy points. So you could say on one hand that he's a pretty solid regression candidate. He's getting pretty decent usage for a running back, and that would be all fine and good. But I have no faith, no confidence that the Indianapolis offense is going to be able to move the ball effectively. The Miami defense, especially in the secondary, by PFF has been graded as one of the best secondaries in the league. And Carson Wentz, he better watch it. If he loses this game, they could end up benching him for the rest of the year. At least they're going to be clamoring for it.
Yeah, and it would actually benefit them because they lose a first-round pick if Carson Wentz plays 75% or more of snaps. It is possible. It is very possible that the Colts go to 0-5 after 5 weeks. Very, very possible because they already are 0-3. They got the Dolphins in a game where they're slight dogs on the road. And then they have the Ravens in Baltimore next week. They have 3 straight road games, which just sucks to open up your, 3 or 5 weeks to the season. But it could get ugly for sure. I did a start sit video over on the fantasy football channel, Awesemo fantasy football channel. Would love for you to check all of that stuff out and subscribe to that channel if you're into season long stuff. It's a lot of fun and I love talking about it. But I did one, and I said as a must starts this week, I'll never do like the Derrick Henrys, Matt, just wasting people's time. But I threw Gaskin and Taylor in there. For DFS, I think it's wildly different. But if you drafted Taylor in the 2nd round and Gaskin in like the 6th round, you pretty much have to just say, all right, I'm going to ride with them this week because the opportunity is there. But like you said, when you're up competing against another 12 games, many of which have much higher totals and better game environments, it's just not the most appealing spot.
Right. And, it's nice that Taylor is 10th among running backs on the slate in expected fantasy points, except for the fact that he's 8th in running backs salary this week. So it's not like you're getting any kind of discount here. So you need multiple things to go right here. You need the Colts game script to be better than Vegas projects. And then you need Taylor to have some sort of ceiling game that we have not seen already. He has to outperform his salary by a wide margin. Now, his backfield running mate, if you will, Nyheim Hines, that's a different story here. He's 27th in salary over at DraftKings at the running back position, 4,900. And the Awesemo projection this week is pretty rosy. And I kind of understand it, especially if they are in a close game or they're coming back from behind. Nyheim Hines should be heavily involved in the passing game. As expected, he's inside the top 30 running backs on this slate in expected fantasy points, especially on a full PPR platform like DraftKings. I feel like I bang the drum for a player like Nyheim Hines, but he's constantly a player that can get you just enough value. And he has that 25-point ceiling in a perfect game environment where I think he's a fine DFS play, and I think he's better than Taylor this week.
I know. It's crazy. He even vultured a touchdown inside the 10 last week. My God, it's tough. Essen Wrist says, I'm struggling to find a cheap defense this week. Dude, if you really just want to go out, go with the Lions. Go with the Lions. I mean, it's ugly, and I'll definitely have a lot of Chicago Bears. I'll have a decent amount of Allen Robinson if Dalton is starting, but Fields has been sacked at the 3rd highest clip in the league, and he's only played like 1 game and a quarter and a half, or a half, whatever. Not good. And the Lions' one advantage is that defensive line. So I just saw that comment, figured I'd throw that out there. But I mean, look, Lions secondary is pure garbage. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. Michael Pittman has seen a 30 and 35% target share over his last 2 games, Matt. That's pretty good. Could have a relatively difficult matchup here, but is Pittman somebody where you're willing to lean on the volume, or are the pass catchers on both sides of this game just unappealing to you?
Yeah, I don't have to tell you that it's not a great looking spot compared to some of these other games, but Michael Pittman has already shown a 20-plus DraftKings point performance already this year. He has a salary that's pretty middling, wide receiver 20 on DraftKings, 5,400. And he has a projection that's slightly inside of the top 20. So he looks like a decent value play. Then we look at the ownership projections. He's projected for under 3%. So do I think it's a bad leverage play in a tournament? No, it's not bad. It's just not a place I have to get to this week.
Yeah, I'm with you there as well. I'll tell you what, though. On the other side, I've seen a lot of talk about Jalen Waddle this week. Matt, what's encouraging is he was targeted 13 times and caught 12 of them. What's not encouraging is he averaged less than 5 yards per reception. I mean, you're basically like running back status just in terms of where he's catching the football. To me, it's just not a very fun spot. It just straight PPR points is what you're relying on. Even less than a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster in terms of yards per reception, where last year you just hoped that he would get the receptions and give you 50 yards and maybe a score. But all in all, this is a tough spot for me to feel good about. You know what his ADOT is or was in week 3?
Was it under 3?
2.8. It's
that
3.
Really is like a hybrid role, like a running back wide receiver.
It's 3.7 on the season.
Unbelievable. Well, okay, so this is the reason I use expected fantasy points so often, because clearly just watching that game as a fan, you understand that not all targets are created equal for all wide receivers in all offenses. So we need to put those targets, those air yards, into some sort of scale that we can easily talk about so that we can compare wide receivers or just all receivers in general. And Jalen Waddle got a lot of looks. And let's not pretend it doesn't take talent to get open enough in the NFL to get a lot of looks, but they were not so valuable looks. He ranks just inside the top 20 in expected DraftKings fantasy points. So that does make the fact that he's wide receiver 28 at 4,900 kind of appealing. The fact that he's just simply a volume value play. But as you said, in this offense with the role he's getting, it feels hard for him to reach a ceiling performance unless he's used heavily in the red zone all of a sudden, or he breaks a few tackles and gets sort of a broken play touchdown here. I like Waddle going forward. It's just really good sign for a rookie receiver to get that many targets this early in his career. But as you said, seeing a DFS tournament winning score is really hard in the spot.
I totally agree with you with everything you're saying. And I said the same thing about Laviska Shenault on the strategy show for tonight's Thursday night football game with Matt Kajeski, which you can check out on the channel. Albeit lower volume for Shenault than Waddle, but unless you're breaking one, you're just not getting there. Shenault and Waddle have the second and third lowest yards per reception in the year among anyone with 10 plus targets, ahead of only Adam Humphries. So, not great, but Waddle does have 2 red zone targets and one inside of the 5 as well. So I remember last week, I think it was towards the goal line. It was towards the pylon. But I mean, that's what it comes down to. You're right. He's going to need to shed some tackles. And the thing about that is he's going to need to do it all on his own, where like a lot of other guys don't need to do that, but they won't see the same volume. Anything else for this game? Sorry, go ahead.
Indianapolis quietly ranks bottom 5 in yards per pass attempt allowed. Their secondary has not been good. I know they've been beat up. They're hoping to get some players back in the coming weeks here, but they've been a surprise in the negative for their defense, and they're actually bottom 10 in points per play allowed too. Jacoby Brissett has a little bit of rushing upside, but I think he scored more than 25 fantasy points, I think 2 times over the last season of starts for him. So I don't really need to get to any of the quarterbacks here. I'm not interested in an immobile Carson Wentz, I'll tell you that. So if anything, it's especially if Fuller is limited for the rest of the week, then maybe I'll take some tournament chances on Pittman and Waddle.
Okay. Yeah, and no team has allowed more passing touchdowns than the Colts this year either. So they face some good teams, but yeah. Houston and Buffalo, Matt, let's get into this one. My God, 15.5-point spread. Buffalo obviously laying those points at home. 47-point total. The Houston Texans have just a dismal implied total for this game, which again should come as no surprise to anyone's 15.75 implied total for the Houston Texans, 31.25 for the Bills, Matt, which, hey, guess what? Should come as no surprise to anyone, is the highest in the league this week. So I will give you 30 seconds to cover the Houston Texans.
Great. I have no idea why you want to start any of those running backs in any type of fantasy lineup, whether it's dynasty, season long, or DFS. You're just saying a hope and a prayer because they're not getting enough usage. Brandon Cooks, the leader in weighted opportunity, which is an air yard share and target share combined stats for wide receiver, by far the most appealing and probably the only appealing option from the Houston side. Maybe Anthony Miller with more usage expected in the future. He was actually 28th in expected fantasy points, over 12 expected fantasy points to start his season in that first start in week 3.
All right, good stuff. Let's talk about Buffalo. And if you're in season long leagues, you're still starting Brandon Cooks just because he's going to get peppered. But are you saying no or no?
No, absolutely. This much usage, even on a terrible team, is unignorable.
There's nobody else there is the problem, right? So you just have to. But again, that's what makes DFS fun, is everyone has the same players and the same salaries to decide from. It's not like, do I start Brandon Cooks or Cortland Sutton? You don't have to make, well, you can make that choice amongst many other dozens of other options. But when it comes to Buffalo, Stephon Diggs has been, okay. We know that he has one of the highest floors in the leagues, which is nice. And I understand that some people have been a little bit down on him lately. I'm not all that, excuse me, all that worried about it. Matt, you talk about expected fantasy points often. He's still top 10 in expected fantasy points per game. He's the type of guy that is still averaging. This is the crazy thing. Like, yeah, Beasley had a good game. Emmanuel Sanders found the end zone a pair of times, but and Zach Moss, of course, getting into the end zone himself. Diggs is still averaging double-digit targets per game through the first 3 weeks. Let's not sit here and pretend like he is being underutilized. And also a huge thing that I think goes ignored oftentimes, but the Buffalo Bills, even in that game against Washington where they were smoking them, or against Miami where they were smoking them, they're still going to throw the football. So there's just a lot here to like, man. Like they're 19th in run play percentage, and they've won by what, a combined 60 points over the last 2 weeks. It's crazy.
Yeah, this is so good for fantasy football. The Bills are number 1 in our game script adjusted pace ranking right now. And in their adjusted pass rate, they are top 10 in the league. They're going to keep passing in all game scenarios. And as you said, Stephon Diggs, one of the biggest positive regression candidates in the league right now. In this pass-friendly, high-pace offense with a high game total, I will keep riding Stephon Diggs in DFS until that ceiling performance happens, because we haven't seen it yet. But all of the usage indicates that it's going to happen. And we have no concerns now, especially after what the Buffalo passing game was able to do against the Washington defense, which does clearly seem overrated to begin the season. I have no concerns about this passing defense against a Houston team that is arguably in the same tier of secondary as what Washington is now.
I'm with you. You want to hear some crazy pace stats on the Bills this season? Listen to this. Dude. You'll appreciate this. When they're leading by 7+ points, they're still playing at the 5th fastest pace in the league. Okay. When they're leading by over a touchdown, they're still playing 26 seconds per play. When they're trailing by 7+ points, I guess that was against Pittsburgh, they're playing at the fastest pace in the league, under 20 seconds per play, which is stupid.
Oh my God.
Situation neutral, Matt, 2nd in the league in seconds per play. So you can even in the second half, they're 11th in seconds per play, which if you're looking at the second half of both of these games, they were out of reach by halftime over the last 2 weeks. There is nothing about this team right now that doesn't scream elite fantasy upside, elite game stack potential. Like, do you know how crazy that is, though, to be ahead by 7+ points? Like, and we know that they only give us 7+ points, but they were ahead by a lot more than 7, and they're still 5th in pace.
That's perfect for fantasy football scoring, for production in general. And I will say that just playing these running backs, we're clamoring about the passing attacks. And so that does mean the probability of these running backs on the Bills, either Moss or Singletary, going off, it does go down. But I still think they're fine leverage plays in a high total game where the expected ownership for either player is under 3%. Oh, it's actually 3.1 for Devin Singletary. So I certainly think the passing attack is the smartest way to attack this game. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the Bills are in such a good situation that the Chiefs no longer break the top stacks tool this week. In fact, in our value ranking for the top stacks on DraftKings, the Bills come out as number 1, neck and neck in top stack probability with Kansas City this week. So, of course, Diggs is a great option. Emmanuel Sanders, huge game last week. He still seems like he could have more ceiling games in his future. And, of course, you could go to Cole Beasley, classically ahead of his salary-based expectations in expected fantasy points because of the pace and the passing of this team. He's 10th among wide receivers on the slate in expected fantasy points on DraftKings, still just 20th in salary. He's never going to have a high salary, certainly not near Diggs. So he could be a value for sure.
There are not many wide receivers in the league that find gaps in coverage in the middle of the field better than Cole Beasley.
And it's not exciting, right? Even in a good situation like this, where all signs point to Buffalo's passing attack blowing up here, he's only seeing 9.5 projected ownership. That's 11th among wide receivers. You're not that chalky going to him. And certainly from a salary-based standpoint, you could get Allen, Sanders, and Beasley and possibly capture a lot of that offense if you want to fade Diggs in one particular lineup.
For sure. But I don't think Beasley gets credit for his ability to get open. And when you can get open as often as Cole Beasley does, there's going to be some big games and your quarterback's going to look your way. So you're right. It's not exciting, but he's always finding a way. Now, I want to ask you one last thing on Buffalo. I think it's kind of an important one here. That's what I do, Matt. I ask the hard questions, what do you make of the trend in snap share for Singletary and Moss? Now it's pretty crazy, right? Because Singletary played 75% of snaps in week 1. Moss was a healthy scratch, or healthy inactive, I should say. Then it went from 66 Singletary to 28 Moss. Then it went from 43 Singletary to 56 Moss. How much do you think that was just due to the game flow, to the blowout? And how much of that is, hey, Zach Moss is a good goal line back. The guy's playing well. He's even catching some passes. And we're going to be looking at, for the rest of the season, pretty much a 50-50 timeshare in terms of snaps. Because that's kind of where I feel like it's leading.
You said it. I really just feel like the distances from 50% for both players is just kind of noise. And I don't think the Bills care all that much who they have back there. They like both players. And so from a DFS standpoint, I'm probably just going with the player that fits in salary, and in a perfect world, the lower owned player. But when we're talking about a player in Singletary who's 3.1% projected ownership, you're not getting a huge boost to your uniqueness by going to Moss at 1.9% either.
Anything else here, or should we move on to Detroit, Chicago?
Oh, yeah, that barn burner. This is such a good spot for Buffalo. I encourage you to have plenty of stacks of the Bills.
And given like we just talked about everything when it comes to pace and just the way that the game adjusted, what was it? Game adjusted run play percentage?
Game adjusted rush rate. That's in our advanced
same
stats
thing. Yeah.
Over on Awesemo.
I just always forget the actual title of it. Yeah. Same thing. Right. All of that stuff suggests that it doesn't matter how much they're winning by, they're going to throw the football, and you will not find that very often. Chicago and Detroit. All right. So the Bears hosting the Detroit Lions. And I've proclaimed this throughout the week, Matt, that I would rather, if I'm playing any skill players for the Bears, I would rather Andy Dalton over Justin Fields right now, not long-term, but just right now. And I'll explain that in a little bit. But first, let's hit on the Lions, 2.5-point dogs. They have now stayed competitive in a couple of games. They crawled back from a 28-point deficit in week 1 against San Francisco. Then in week 2, they were actually leading the Packers and then, of course, cratered. But then last week should have won. It's just Justin Tucker's the best kicker ever. And Marcus Brown legitimately forgot how to play football and dropped what would have been 3 touchdowns. So besides the point, we know one thing. Their defense is awful. They're always going to be forced to throw. I want to know where you stand on a guy like DeAndre Swift. And I'll shut up, Matt, but I'm passionate about this one thing. You and I talked about it in the offseason too when we did the mock drafts. If Swift was going to get there as like a 3rd-round pick in fantasy leagues, he wasn't going to do it on the ground. And so far, we've been accurate about that. All of Swift's primary production, where he's really racking up the numbers, is being a top option in the passing game and a dynamic one at that.
Yeah, that's true. But again, expected fantasy points, it all comes out in the wash. And I saw it. He had much more goal line usage, a great looking goal line carry on that touchdown last week. He is number 3 amongst all running backs in expected fantasy points. That talks to you about the value of a target over a general running back touch, a standard handoff. And Coach Dan Campbell, I kind of believe him when he says DeAndre Swift has just simply earned more playing time and more touches. We've talked about it on the show. It's just more advantageous for Jared Goff to get it out of his hands quickly and into his playmakers' hands. And lo and behold, his best playmakers are in the backfield and usually doing some sort of check down route at the tight end position with TJ Hawkinson. So I think they're crazy to continue to ride DeAndre Swift, one of the best prospects over the last few years coming out of the draft at Georgia. And he's only been right at expectation in terms of fantasy points scored below or above expectation. He's right at running back 35. So I'm fine going there, especially when we have the Awesemo projection outpacing his RB10 salary on DraftKings.
Nicely said. And one thing that is pretty important too, if you were to take all of the running backs in the league this year, right? And you were to say, all right, just set minimum targets of 10. I think that's reasonable, because then you're taking the guys that are getting, hell, even Derrick Henry has, I think, 10 or 11 targets, right? So if you were to take that,
Derrick Henry, yes,
yeah, exactly, dude, he's 12th among all running backs in receptions. It's nuts. Imagine if he finished top 15 in receptions, given his rushing attempts.
I actually think that, sorry, this is a tangent, obviously.
Sorry,
but
go ahead.
I think that is a possible way to play, especially when they're playing the Jets this week. What if Derrick Henry is just getting more targets now, and that's just a thing now, and we haven't actually fully adjusted to the fact that he actually should be a 10K running back?
Yeah.
And we don't know yet.
And don't forget, Todd Downing is the OC there now. It's not Arthur Smith. So how do we know that Todd Downing's not like, hey, pal, you'll rest when you're dead. Get out there on passing downs and put in some work, because he's actually not a bad pass catcher is the thing. He's not a bad pass catcher. They've just tried to, in my opinion, alleviate some of that additional work when you're getting 30 touches per game already. But dude, let's wait till we get there, because it'll be a fun conversation. But these are the guys at running back that rank higher than DeAndre Swift in yards per route run. And mind you, when you're running as many routes as Swift is, and you're still putting up those insane yard efficiency numbers, it's even more impressive, right? He is third in routes run among all running backs with 10 plus targets. And he is fourth in yards per route run. So he's third in routes run. He's fourth in yards per route run. Here's who he's behind: Cordarrelle Patterson, who's run half as many routes as him; McCaffrey, who's played, basically 2 games, and then Kareem Hunt and Nyheim Hines. So he's fifth. I'm sorry, but it just goes to show you that his not only ability, but the efficiency, which is what I care about in the passing game, has been not only good, but elite, Matt. And that's awesome, especially in a matchup like this that could stay close.
Yeah, he's obviously, you're not going to be alone. It looks like 11.7% projected.
Oh, that came
ownership
up since yesterday.
Yeah, so I think that we might see it go even higher before Sunday's games kick off.
I'm still not totally opposed to it. It doesn't mean I'm going to just go all out on Swift, but he's seen 21 looks against Baltimore. It's not like in a game like this, he might actually be a 15 carry guy as well. 13 against Green Bay, and then 11 and 11 against San Francisco. So if you're talking 20 total looks, half in the passing game, half in the run game, there's a lot of upside there. There's a big ceiling. But anyway, what do you make of the pass catchers? Hawkinson, Khalif Raymond, Quintez Cephas.
Yeah, quiet game for Hawkinson last week. Still, you chase the usage, the overall opportunity that we've seen all season long. Still ranks second among all tight ends on this slate in expected fantasy points, 13.4 DraftKings points. And this time, we're not seeing a lot of ownership projected for him at all. 2.1% ownership projection. That's outside the top 20. That probably has to do with the other players around him in his salary. So a lot of people are just building their lineups differently than him. But that's kind of appealing. We want to play a player like Hawkinson when no one else is on him. And yes, I know the game total is low. We don't really expect much at all from the Detroit offense. And as we saw last week, the Detroit offense kind of seems to go as the opposing offense goes against their defense. So when the Ravens weren't scoring a ton of points, they seemed totally content going full kneecaps, keeping the ball on the ground, and just trying to run out the clock that way. But ultimately, I still want to play the best pass catcher if I can with low ownership. So TJ Hawkinson does have some appeal for me with projections right in line with salary-based expectations.
I like it too. And hey, hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Would love to push us over that 100 mark right at the 30-minute mark in today's show. I think we could pull it off. We got 283 watching. We got a lot of views after the fact, Matt, because this is a marathon, but then we got the ride or dies that hang with us throughout the whole show. I mean, you can't beat that.
Yeah, that's the best. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you all.
What do you make of Chicago and the quarterback situation where Matt Nagy said it could be Foles, it could be Dalton, it could be Justin Fields? I told you I'd rather have Dalton if I'm playing Allen Robinson this week, just this week, against such an awful, pitiful defense that's allowing a league high 10.3 yards per attempt to passers. I'd rather have the veteran.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think you're probably also in the public consensus as well after the general field was pretty excited about Justin Fields. And then there was just a disaster seeing him hold on to the ball too long, and certainly clamoring for Matt Nagy to improve his game plan for his mostly mobile quarterback held immobile last week against Cleveland. So I agree with you. Certainly from an accuracy and ability to run the offense standpoint, Fields seemed overwhelmed last week. I did watch Kurt Warner had like a QB film room. It was about 15 minutes long, just breaking down some of the plays of Fields last week. And it basically looked like a quarterback who was holding on to the ball too long and not making really good reads. Just a quarterback who was in a little bit over his head last week. So I agree with you. I think Andy Dalton is probably better for the pass catchers in this game and just the offense in general. You know, we talk about all the time, the running back expected fantasy points are directly tied to the efficiency of the offense he plays within. So David Montgomery probably gets a boost if Dalton is playing.
Sure.
The one thing I will say is that now that Fields has disappointed and some people have lost money on him last week, he's probably going to see even less expected ownership if he does end up playing. And let's not pretend his speed went away. He can still break off huge runs like only a few quarterbacks in this league can do. It just obviously is lower probability than we expected after seeing that first week out there.
I'm with you. And look, those 9 sacks were not all Fields, but you have a lot of people being like, yeah, he's mobile, so that's why you want him back there if the line can't hold up. Well, he wasn't very mobile last week. Like you said, it was, Matt, you know what it was? It was kind of a deer in the headlights thing. The guy's brand new to the league. He's got no protection, no time to throw. That's why even though a pocket statuesque type quarterback like Andy Dalton isn't going to escape pressure, my assumption is he can get the ball out easier, go through his reads a little bit quicker. Andy Dalton gets shit on, and I've been responsible for that as well over the years. But let's not pretend that at one point he wasn't a very viable fantasy starter who gave AJ Green, a healthy AJ Green, some of the best fantasy seasons anyone's ever going to see. Am I wrong?
I think he might have been a little bit of a product of the offensive system he was within. But before he broke his thumb, I believe, in the 2015 season, he was a legitimate MVP candidate. Can't take that away from him.
So, and I'm sorry, wait, who were you saying was overrated?
I think Dalton, Andy Dalton in general went as his offense and his roster.
Okay, not Green, though.
But no, not Green. Green was
okay.
Fantastic.
I'm sorry. So what I was saying is, and I phrased it wrong. I was never saying that Andy Dalton was a great fantasy quarterback. I did say that. I didn't mean it. I meant that what he was able to do was create fantasy production for his receivers. Yes, and I just worded it poorly, but to kind of parlay that information into the whole Allen Robinson conversation, I do think if you have Andy Dalton, and Allen Robinson hasn't exactly been running the longest routes, but Matt, this Detroit, most people understand that, but if you don't, this Detroit secondary, they're not just bad. They're league worst. They're awful. They're bringing cornerbacks off the street from Whole Foods, like this is not a good secondary. If there's ever a chance for Allen Robinson to have that game you're looking for, it's this week. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but they're that bad.
Here's what really scares me about Robinson is that he has such a high target share, over 25% target share, but because of the quality of the offense and the game environments he's played within this year, he is outside the top 30 wide receivers in expected fantasy points, which is just ridiculous for a talent like that. And I saw some film breakdown on Twitter. They were doing the all 22, and just there are a couple of moments of him just like literally just standing on the field like,
yeah, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Like, what am I supposed to do? So, I mean, you feel for a player like Robinson. It's almost like what Larry Fitzgerald had to get to. Maybe he has his Kurt Warner come in at some point in his career and lifts him up. But at this point, Man, it's really hard to like any of these Bears pass catchers. And even though I'm seeing that David Montgomery has a projection well ahead of his running back 13 salary on DraftKings, that doesn't feel very good to me. I just think it speaks to the general poor quality of the Detroit offense and the possibility that the Chicago offense in general can finally show some semblance of efficiency, allowing David Montgomery to either score or just clean up a winning game at the end. I don't think that's a huge probability here. And like most of the rest of the field, I don't have high hopes for Allen Robinson. As you said, this is a great place to turn it around, but 4.5% projected ownership, I think a lot of people have given up.
That's what makes me like him a little bit, though, is he's so low owned right now.
Very fair.
You know, that's if Robinson was chalk, I don't know if I'd have any of him, honestly. I'm really not sure I would, but he is good. And we have seen him produce with with Mitch Trubisky, with Nick Foles, with Chase Daniel, you know, career backup. Man, has that guy had a lucrative career doing shit? You know?
Right.
God, what a
and you know what? That's just a
life.
that's just a general DFS strategy that you don't have to overthink it any further than great player, horrible defense, low ownership, good.
Yeah, that's all. Play. That's all. Exactly. It's not that deep. That's all it is for me. Yeah. All right. Tennessee and the New York Jets, Matt. Tennessee could be without Julio and AJ Brown. I mean, I'm expecting Julio Jones or AJ Brown just not to play. With Julio, I still don't know. But Derrick Henry, a conversation that you and I kind of teased just a few minutes ago, has 17 carries and 21 total looks in week one. That was a game that they got smoked, though. So I almost just throw that out the window when you're facing the Jets now. 35 carries, 6 targets, 41 total touches in week 2. 28 carries, 3 targets, 31 total touches in week 3. And now you could be down your 2 top pass catching options as touchdown favorites against the New York Jets. I know he's expensive. I totally understand that. But my God, if this was ever a spot where he wears the defense down and just beats them to a pulp in the second half and ends up rushing for $150 and 2 scores in the fourth quarter, I wouldn't be shocked.
I really think that everything beyond Derrick Henry getting somewhere around 40 touches, then maybe a little less than that, is overthinking this game, right? Everything else beyond him just being the entire focal point of a game they just want to get through with the same level of health that they currently have or better. Cash lineups, forget about it. Press the lock button on Derrick Henry and then figure out the rest of your lineup here. And like we talked about a little bit earlier on the show already, the real change is this now. I say this because there's only been 3 weeks, but consistent usage in the receiving game. Bottom line is, if Derrick Henry is going to have 30 touches a game and 5 of them or so each week is going to be through the air, he's a 10K running back. With his talent on his team, especially against a team like the Jets, he should be priced way higher. So even though his salary is incredibly high compared to the rest of the field, running back 1 overall, I still think he might be fundamentally mispriced against a team like the Jets, especially when then you consider the wide receiver room is really beaten up. As you said, I don't think A.J. Brown is going to play. I do think Julio is going to play. That's how it's reflected in our projections currently. Obviously, we'll update it if anything changes there. Julio Jones does have kind of an appealing salary, $6,500, wide receiver 11 against the Jets. I'll take that in tournaments, but it starts and ends with Derrick Henry. Rock solid play, probably the best play on the slate.
He's top 15 in routes run.
Let's go. That's awesome.
That's crazy. And again, 10 plus targets for running backs. He is 8th in yards per route run. Like, he's putting the numbers up, Matt. And I love to see it. I really do. Can we just point out the fact that like 3 receptions for 31 yards last week, a long reception of 14, 6 for 55. So he averaged 10.3, then he averaged 9.2 with a long of 15. Week 1, a little less impressive, 3 for 19, but these aren't 3 for 6, just getting smoked at the line of scrimmage. I mean, He's actually creating yardage on these. So there's nothing
I'm a
I don't
numbers
like.
guy. I'm in the spreadsheets. I know I'm not supposed to talk about football strategy and what plays you run, but why isn't a coach doing everything they can to get Derrick Henry in space so that he breaks one tackle and he's gone? Because all he does is break tackles.
And he has sneaky breakaway speed. No one knows it until he breaks through to the second level, and then he's gone, which is crazy. So
yeah, and then he outruns all those DBs. It's amazing.
Yeah, I could rain down superlatives upon this guy all day, but we don't have time for that. So I think we all agree. Great play. If Julio's active and not limited, what are you doing with him and the rest of the passing attack?
If Julio is active and not limited, all systems go in tournaments. I love it. Right now, he's got an 8.5% expected ownership. That's outside the top 12. And I think it's because of his sort of mid-tier salary for wide receivers, not top 5 or anything like that. But I think people are going different directions with their lineup building this week. So against the Jets, especially as direct leverage of this most probable play in Derrick Henry, I really like it. Now, is it possible here where against the Jets have been closer to average in yards per carry allowed and yards per attempt allowed than they were last season, but is it possible here that we could get 225 plus point performances from this team here, and it's really concentrated to those two players? I think it's possible. Beyond those two, though, it's really just large field tournaments, a little bit of Chester Rogers, sure, still outside the top 50 in expected fantasy points per game. And really beyond that, it gets pretty dicey.
It does. And we had a comment in chat too that said passing is where the Jets are bad, not against the run. Jets are 14th against the run. Yes, but this is what I'm saying though.
14th is average.
It's average. And Henry wears I don't think people understand. Him and Nick Chubb are guys that will just wear you down. And that might just sound like football talk, but it's true. Look what Henry did against Seattle in the second half of that game. He'll wear you down. So I don't really worry too much about that, especially, and you're going to get worn down a lot more when your quarterback is Zach Wilson and you can't move the football anyway. So I like all of that this week. Matt, quickly on the Jets.
Oh, boy. This is just probably an offense that until we see them do anything remotely efficient on offense, that you're only talking like millionaire maker, just super large field tournaments. RIP Elijah Moore breakout season. Really hoped for it. Even Corey Davis. I mean, yeah, he's 23rd in expected fantasy points, but he's 27th in salary. So do you really want like a slight value play based on opportunity alone on the Jets, where we've seen just horrible inefficiency across the board? Let me read to you some of these fantasy points below expectation numbers for the Jets right now. Wilson, minus 3.7 below expectation. Ty Johnson, minus 4.2. Michael Carter, minus 2.5. Ryan Griffin, minus 1. Elijah Moore, minus 5.4. Corey Davis is the only one who's even close to meeting his efficiency numbers, minus 0.3 expected fantasy points. I think that just speaks to the level of talent Corey Davis is, and he's basically working with nothing here.
Yeah, there's not much there at all. But there is a whole lot to love about PrizePicks, and I hope you guys have checked it out. If you haven't done so yet, I can assure you, you will enjoy it. It looks great. The UI is beautiful. People enjoy playing there, and you're not dealing with people that are using optimizers or MME or sharks or any of that stuff. Maybe you enjoy that, but that's what you got FanDuel and DraftKings and all that for. Here, it's a little bit of a different style, but it's a great way to build your bankroll to win money. And I think there's legitimate edges to be found here. I was telling Matt about one before the show, and I'll get to that in a second, but it's daily prop based contest. So essentially you're parlaying props, which is cool. A lot of sites don't allow you to do that anyway. You just pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players available on the board to go over or under their projected scores. If you pick 5 of them correctly in a lineup, you can net up to 10x your entry fee. You don't have to pick 5, but you could. And you've got basketball, baseball, NFL, esports, all of that stuff. You can take advantage of the mixed sport entry feature. So if you feel good about more than one sport, you can throw them all into the same lineup, which is sweet. Use the promo code Awesemo. Receive an instant deposit match bonus up to $100. Up to $100 using the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. Download it in the App Store or the Google Play Store, or go to prizepicks.com, wherever you want to play it. Check it out. You will enjoy it. And Matt, this is why I was saying when you and I do shows that obviously use the player prop tool at Awesemo. That's the first things first. It's free right now, at least for now. It's free, totally free. But also, when you compare some of these to other books, you can find some real edges. And I'll give you an example of one. And when I say edges or good, like closing line value, any of that stuff, it doesn't mean you're going to win. It just means you made an objectively good bet or a good pick. Joe Mixon, when we were doing the show yesterday, was my guy to score. Now it's over under half a touchdown, okay, on PrizePicks. But if you look at any other place, it's a one-way bet. You can't bet no on it on DraftKings. You can just bet yes. It was minus 165 to score for Joe Mixon. But on PrizePicks, it's straight yes, no. There's no juice on either side. It's just over or under half a touchdown. They have since pulled that one, Matt, and I know why. Because
I think I can figure out too.
Yeah. But if you hit that yesterday, even if he doesn't score, you're saying, you know what? I got insane value on that. That is how you win long-term. What do you have for us, Matt? Give me one pick on PrizePicks.
All right. We haven't gotten there yet in our breakdown, but I love this Cleveland, Minnesota game. And I think we're going to see some big production from the Minnesota side of the ball. I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson over 80.5 receiving yards. He's leading that team by far in weighted opportunity, so I'm going there. Thielen's still a great play. Man, all the guy does is catch touchdowns, but for receiving yardage, I'm going with Jefferson over 80.5.
I dig it. I'm going DJ Shark over 49.5 receiving yards. This guy has been targeted a ton downfield, even though they haven't connected. He has a large, him and Marvin Jones have over 65%. And this is for tonight's game. Why not? We'll have some fun, right? Over 65% of the team's air yard share. Just, he's going to get the opportunities. Low floor, but I think the ceiling's very high on DJ Shark. And he's good enough to where a team that's probably going to be forced to air it out again tonight, I don't hate him getting 50 yards. That seems pretty attainable for sure. All right, Matt, let's keep this one moving. The ShamWow guy's back in chat. RIP Billy Hayes. It's Billy Mays, bro. I mean, this guy's the ShamWow guy, and he's calling it Billy Mays. Okay, that's shameful.
Yeah, that's shameful.
That is shameful. Yes, it is. Wow, that's shameful. Jordan, you're a flex guy? You're a flex seal guy? Okay. We sawed this boat in half. That commercial is outrageous. He wants you to believe that he sawed a fan boat in half, brought it back out on the Mars with nothing but Flex Seal, and it was perfectly fine. I called bullshit. We need a show just breaking down all of those as seen on TV products and their ads. That's ridiculous. Like, you got people patching their swimming pools with flex tape. Come on, man. That is just insane. It'd be like the scene from Grown Ups where Kevin James goes to get out of the pool and the whole thing just collapses. All right, let's keep going. Kansas City, Philadelphia, and don't worry, guys. There are some games that we will breeze through, so we'll get out of here in a decent amount, in a good time. Probably not. Kansas City, Philadelphia. Matt, is there any way the Chiefs fall to 1-3?
I mean, yeah, it's possible, but
I don't see it.
Gosh, after Philadelphia last night, that doesn't give us a lot of hope for them going forward. Now, we got to say that Dallas's defense, especially in the secondary, and just Micah Parsons alone, they do look like a better defense than we expected. But Philadelphia's offense has really sputtered since that week 1 performance that got us really excited. I don't see the Chiefs falling to this team, especially after that surprise loss last week. But you got to love this from a fantasy perspective. 54.5 Vegas total. And just the fact that it's not the highest total on the slate makes it really exciting. Whenever I have Patrick Mahomes and it's not the highest total game, so it's possible that people are looking elsewhere from an ownership perspective, I get excited.
I do too. I tweeted yesterday that Nick Sirianni is the type of guy who will run Miles Sanders 4 times this week. And when questioned about it by the media, he'll go, he got twice as many carries as last week. What are you talking about? 2 carries is It's inexcusable. It's unacceptable. Matt, there's no way to describe that as anything outside of egregious. He's your best playmaker. He's your most dynamic player, and he was completely unused. And I understand that they fell behind a little bit, but you're down 14-7, man. Even 21-7. It's still early in the game in the first half. I think what you're going to see this week is Nick Sirianni overcorrect and go hard to the run game early on. And then next week, he'll probably go right back to what he was doing. That's just like, that is Philadelphia in a nutshell, not to be all narrative driven here, but I think you will see more Miles Sanders, because if you're not using this guy, ship him somewhere where he can be used, because he's awesome. And I don't say that about most Eagles players, because most Eagles offensive players have been shit over the past few years, particularly pass catchers. So I love Kansas City here, Matt. I don't see how Philly stops them. They don't have a linebacking core. Their corners are okay, but what you could see is something similar to what Dak did last week, where it's like, all right, I'll just go to Dalton Schultz. I'll just go wherever they're open, because someone's going to be open, and pick them apart. So I think Kansas City is going to run up a lot of points this week.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to say that is the most likely scenario, and Miles Sanders certainly doesn't grade out. When you compare salary-based expectations as the 8th highest running back in salary on DraftKings, he grades out as a just outside the top 15 running backs in terms of projections. So in the sense that he is a good player in a high total game, that's fine for tournaments. But other than that, I'm not really loving anything on the Philadelphia side of the ball besides Jalen Hurts. I still think that just because of the pass volume and the fact that he does have that rushing upside, whenever the ownership is down in a high total game, that has some appeal, especially in tournaments. But getting to the Chiefs side of the ball, it's still the same old story, despite it not working out as expected. And by the way, I think that Chargers defense is legit.
Oh, yeah.
And that's part of the reason those improvisational plays that we've seen Mahomes be otherworldly at for most of his career did not work out so well last weekend. This week, he does get a Philadelphia team that has been decent against the pass, but it's just not at the same level. They're 9th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 9th in points per play allowed. That's close enough to average where I'm not adjusting anything from the Kansas City side of the ball. So I'm going with the Vegas total. I'm going with the fact that they have such a high implied team total. And I love the players we love to play. Hill, Kelsey, Mahomes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, outside the top 25 running backs on the slate in expected fantasy points.
Wait, you have him outside of the top 25 in expected fantasy points for this week, or on the season he's outside of the top 25?
So on the season, among all the players playing on the slate, he is 25th, 27th among the running backs. So not including the players who aren't on the slate.
Wow. So that means you're off of him?
Again, if I'm playing a player who's playing that many snaps in a high total game in a tournament, I'm not going to tell you that's a bad play. But just from a straight opportunity standpoint, he's just not getting it.
No, but I will say this much. And look, your numbers don't lie. But he fumbled again last week and then still got 11 carries after the fumble. So Reed's clearly sticking with him. He has two targets and 2 carries inside the 10 this year, which is nice. I like that. And again, not a narrative guy, but with this one specific spot, there's a few things that stand out. Andy Reid's coming back to Philly. He was, 14-year tenure in Philly. Philly fans, everyone gives them this like, oh, you're awful. They're horrible. And in some respects they are. But I mean, miss me with that snowballs at Santa shit from 25 years before I was born. I don't want to hear that shit, but in all seriousness, yeah, they get a little intense. Okay. Some players like Ben Simmons just can't handle it in Philly. Others thrive, like AI, or an Embiid. Those type of guys love it. When it comes to Reed, though, he's going to come back here, and he's been back here before. I was actually at one of those games. We got crushed. But if they go up, the fans still love Andy Reid. I mean, we all rooted for him to win the Super Bowl. If they go up by a ton of points, you're going to see a run heavy approach late in that game. I'm telling you right now. Like if it's out of reach, you will see a run heavy approach. I really don't believe at the link Andy Reid is going to look to, and he knows Sirianni too. He was a Peterson guy. he's not going to look to embarrass them. I know it sounds crazy, but I really do think that could be a possibility. So we'll see. But I like Kansas City, Matt. And on the other side, I'm so tempted to say that Sirianni overcorrects and goes heavy Miles Sanders against a really bad Kansas City run defense. And I've heard people say that. But how are we ignoring that Mailata's probably out, Sam Aller's done for the year, Brandon Brooks tore his pec. That's 3 of their 5 starting offensive linemen. And Lane Johnson was limited with an ankle injury at practice, which hobbled him or sidelined him almost all of last season. So
Didn't they trade an offensive lineman right before the season started, like a bench depth offensive lineman right before the season started? Am I crazy about that? Anyway, they could use more depth now.
They could, but we never re-signed Jason Peters, but he's cooked anyway. It's tough, man. Listen, yeah. Andre Dillard.
That's really bad. It
is.
Down 3 offensive linemen is bad.
If they're a healthy line, they're a top 5 run blocking and pass blocking line in the league. No doubt about it. They're just never healthy. And they have a first-round running back from 3 years ago, Andre Dillard. They have to play him. Never panned out. They got Erickson. They drafted in the 2nd round this year. Or Erickson. I don't know. What doesn't matter.
Oh, I have this one stat for you about the Eagles.
Please.
Especially about the lack of usage for Sanders last week. What do you think the Eagles, as a team, rank in yards per carry offensively?
On the season?
On the season.
Well, they have Jalen Hurts. And Miles Sanders is pretty efficient. I'd say 2nd.
They are 2nd in the NFL in yards per carry behind the Baltimore Ravens. So
Crazy.
The common denominator there, rushing quarterback but still run the damn ball a little.
Exactly. And it's not exactly like Sanders hasn't been great. He's averaging 5.2 yards per attempt again this year. He averaged over 5 yards per carry last year. He's good, Matt, but they don't use him, and I worry about that offensive line.
Very fair.
Anything else you like for Philly? Anything you want to get to? And I agree, by the way, that Jalen Hurts just kind of has that floor every week with the ceiling because he'll run.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit in our breakdown of the Monday night game just before lock last Monday. But, the fact that these 2 tight ends in Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz are both on the field so often in a 1-game slate, sure, I'm fine going there, especially in a high total game against the Chiefs where we're probably going to see tons of passing. But they basically just cancel each other out. They're both top 15 in expected fantasy points, both outside the top 10 in expected fantasy points. So especially with a player like Goddard at tight end 6 in salary, man, that's really tough to get to when you have so many good options there. Zach Ertz as a punt play, again, just because of the expected game environment, I'm fine with it, especially saw him catch that touchdown, and there's going to be under 2% projected ownership.
If you guys are premium subs over at Awesemo, I just saw the Colts is in the Awesemo chat right now in Slack office hours. Figured I'd throw that out there at you because it's such an awesome feature that should be taken advantage of. I don't mind you watch the show and shoot some questions at him while you're at it as well, because that guy's won a lot of money playing DFS, Matt, and there's a lot we could all learn from him when it comes to overall game theory and approach. If you wanted to get access to all that stuff, if you wanted to check out the ownership that we referenced, the boom bust tool, the top stack tool, the projections, all of these awesome tools created by Awesemo himself, #1 ranked DFS player in the world, who's won a lot of money using these exact tools. Go to awesemo.com/join. You want to try a week, 25% off, Awesemo Plus Platinum, everything included, not just football, but baseball, basketball, esports, NASCAR, PGA, MMA, everything. You can do so, get 25% off using the promo code NFL Strategy Show, one word, all caps. And maybe you want to make an investment out of it. You want to go for the full year for just football or for all sports or the month, whatever you want to do, we got you covered, whether you're a novice, hobbyist, whether you're serious or a pro, no matter what it is, we got something covered for all of you. And Fantasy Cruncher add-on, you could usually only do a month in a year. Now you can do it for a week as well. So if you wanted to do a full week, you can do that with the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. And last thing, maybe the pockets are kind of light right now and things are tough, but you want to check it out. The Express Pass is $395 or $495 a week. It includes all of our showdown tools, everything for showdown, everything for tiers, and a lot of main slate stuff, the lineup builder, and so much more. So whatever it is you want, check it out. And if you have any questions, my DMs on Twitter are open at Loughy_D. I'm happy to answer those questions. All right, Matt. Carolina, Dallas. No Christian McCaffrey. That's tough. No JC Horn on the other side of that game. I think Dallas overpowers him here.
Interesting. Now, I think those two injuries are the most substantial contributors to the fact that this game should probably be really pass heavy. Not just the fact that Dallas loves to throw the ball almost more so than any other team besides the Buffalo Bills, maybe. But Carolina is going to be forced to lean on their best playmakers, which is DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. Without Christian McCaffrey, I don't care what you did with your fab budget in season-long fantasy leagues. I'm not convinced that Chuba Hubbard nor Royce Freeman get the full workload that we saw even Mike Davis get last season in a similar situation, at least in a one-game sample size. I think we see Sam Darnold throw the ball much more often than his game script adjusted rush rate indicates, and especially because Dallas is going to be throwing a lot, and Vegas backs this up with a very high game total. I'm all over these passing attacks, both sides of the ball.
I am too, but I'll tell you, I'm a little bit less intrigued by Carolina. I think Trayvon Diggs might be the real deal. Micah Parsons is insanely good already. Dallas did not return a ton of starters from last year. And if you shore up that run defense a little bit, it can make everything look a little bit better. I'm not saying they're an elite defense by any stretch of the imagination, Matt, but I don't think they're half as bad as they were last season. And go ahead. I saw you. Go ahead.
I agree. I just don't want to give them the Monday Night Football national TV bump.
That's fine.
That I think that the public is going to feel that way about this Dallas team as well.
But would you agree that the Chargers have a good offense and scored only like 14 points against them?
I agree with that too. I completely agree with you. I'm just trying to think through ways to think about this game going differently than the
field. Oh, no doubt. Would. No doubt. And I'm not saying, to be clear, I'm not saying they're a juggernaut. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that they are better than they were last year by a significant margin. That's all. They're probably middle of the road defense, where last year they were bottom 5.
Yeah, I'm looking. I talked about the stat a lot last year. It gets updated in week 4 for the first time with 2021 stats. It's called schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, which basically tries to take out the fact that some defensive play worse offenses and contextualizes that. You're actually right. The Cowboys are right at league average, just allowing 4 points different than the league average in fantasy points to total offenses.
For sure. All right. Makes sense. I look at it like this. You lose JC Horn. That's pretty significant. CJ Henderson, if he plays, he's going to be limited. And we really don't know how good he is, even though he was a first-round pick and has made some splashes. Losing McCaffrey makes you kind of one-dimensional. Are they going to lean more on Robbie Anderson? It's possible. Is Diggs good to the point where he can make life kind of difficult for DJ Moore? I think it's possible. And is Sam Darnold in a tough matchup going to be able to come through? I just look at Dallas, and I think losing the corner for Carolina is so big that I really think that Dallas offense, if the line is healthy and Dak is healthy, is a juggernaut. I do. I think they're that good. Pollard and Zeke in the backfield. Schultz has looked good. CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. I mean, they did all of that last week without Amari or CeeDee Lamb having to do anything. So I think they overpower him, but I agree that it will be pass heavy too. And that's really all that matters at this point.
Right. Yeah. I still think playing Ezekiel Elliott or even Tony Pollard in tournaments when not many people are on them with this many implied Vegas points is not a bad idea in tournaments.
Sure.
But obviously you're really excited about CeeDee Lamb with the injuries to the Carolina secondary. Now they did trade for CJ Henderson, kind of a surprise mid-season deal here, trading away Dan Arnold on the Carolina side. We'll probably see him get some playing time, but that doesn't change my opinion, my high opinion on CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. And Dak Prescott, I love Dak and catch.
For sure. Matt Rule said if he plays, he'll be limited, but there's no guarantee he plays this week, so we'll see. New York Giants and New Orleans Saints. The Giants are just dealing with myriad injuries here. Not great. Barkley's questionable with the knee. I'm assuming that's just some maintenance, right? Some rest. Galladay is also limited, but who knows if he's even at 100% dealing with that hip. And it looks like Shepard and Slayton probably just are not going to play. So that really hamstrings them, especially given how underwhelming Evan Ingram has been over the past couple of seasons. The Saints defense is their strong suit, Matt, and it allows them to run the football at a high clip. Alvin Kamara has now seen 20 carries in back 2 or 3 games, and he'd only done that once in his career. He's only had 20 carries once in his career prior to this season. He's already done it twice. I think he gets a ton of work this week. On the Giants side, I'm really uninterested in most of this game. Even if Galladay is the only quality active wide receiver, I'm just not thrilled about this offense.
No, how could you be? We talked about the Saints-Patriots game last week being basically a stay away spot, and really no one in that game had any sort of had to have it scored for tournaments, though Kamara was a little bit more involved than some of us thought he was going to be much more involved, but it's good that he's getting usage. But the Saints aren't playing a fantasy-friendly style of offense anymore. This is very, very far from the Drew Brees offense. And so it looks like we're going to have one of these ultra-efficient week 1 style performances from the Saints to have any sort of semblance of a shootout for New Orleans going forward this year. And then you talk about the Giants. They have an 18-point implied total as a team right now, and it could even be worse by the time we get to game day, because I don't know how they generate any offense with this many offensive weapons out. Yes, Evan Ingram has had a history of being peppered with targets in situations like this, but how healthy really is he? The only player I'm really thinking about at all is Saquon Barkley at under 4% projected ownership, literally just because of the talent of the player in a spot where no one is going to be playing him. But it's not like he's easy to get to. 6,700 is 6th among running backs on this slate. And we should mention that Daniel Jones does offer a pretty decent floor and a pretty high probability of 20-plus DraftKings points simply because of the rushing that he'll probably have to do as he's scrambling against that tough New Orleans defensive line.
Yeah, that's about it, right? There's not much else to feel good about there. 18-point implied total. I'm mostly off it. I want nothing to do with Barkley here either.
Is Kadarius Toney going to ever see more work? They did draft a receiver in the first round, and all their receivers might be out. Yeah, but that's crazy talk. I know.
It's probably going to be Colin Johnson, who was targeted 7 times last week. I don't know, man. I will say, though, on the New Orleans side, it's not shocking to me that Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry are the 2 highest projected owned players this week. Like, Alvin Kamara has not been efficient on the ground, but I have trouble believing that is going to hold up. I think you're going to see some positive regression in terms of efficiency for Alvin Kamara. I do. And I think Sean Payton is intentionally kind of curbing Jameis Winston's propensity to make mistakes by running the ball more and creating these favorable game scripts where they don't need to throw a lot. And I think it's also a team that if they fall behind like they did against Carolina, they could be in some trouble. But I'm projecting Alvin Kamara for another heavy workload, Matt. What he does with that, I don't know. And it sucks that he's not getting as much in the passing game, but the guy is a pinball who can bounce off of anybody. And all in all, I have no problem with it. I do like Derrick Henry a little bit more, but I have no problem ever going to Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised to see that Alvin Kamara grades out ahead of Derrick Henry in our projections so far. But I totally understand it. Top 5 amongst running backs in expected fantasy points. And he's playing against a Giants defense that ranks bottom 3 right now in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing offenses. That's easier for opposing offenses here. So I did just say a long diatribe about how New Orleans isn't playing fantasy-friendly football. That doesn't mean their workhorse running back can't have a humongous performance in a great matchup here. I do expect the Saints to win. I do expect the Saints to control the time of possession, and that would indicate that Kamara had a huge day either on the ground or through the air. Love him this week. Of course, he's great for cash games, but besides Henry, probably my second favorite play.
It's so weird that these books still won't put up a rushing attempts prop for Kamara. Not sure why, but I think if you're setting one, you probably put it around. If I was setting that, I'd probably be putting it around 18.5.
Yeah. Tony Jones has been phased out. We saw him used quite a bit to start the season in that strange game environment against the Packers, but he's right now outside the top 45 running backs in expected fantasy points, under 5 per game.
Right. 84% of snaps in back-to-back weeks for Alvin Kamara, and mostly all of the running back carries. I love it. Quick thoughts, anything from the passing game that you're going to here?
Yeah, I'm not interested in Marquez Callaway. The talk of the preseason has been mostly nothing. He did have that crazy touchdown catch with Jameis Winston falling down. But no, I don't have any interest in the 58th wide receiver in expected fantasy points at the 38th in salary. No, nothing. Maybe, no, not Adam Troutman. I'm looking at the Saints defense as a really solid play here, but we didn't have to tell you that they're the 3rd highest in salary.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was just looking at Alvin Kamara over the last 2 weeks as you were talking about Tony Jones getting less work, because Latavius Murray was a guy, he was pretty much like a 9 to 10 touch guy when he was in this offense. And, now Alvin Kamara, 52 to 16 touches over the last 2 weeks. He has just dominant stranglehold on this backfield, and he should. So that's the one spot that I'm looking to get to. Aside from that, actually, no, Tony Jones only has 5 carries over the last 2 weeks? Yeah, only 5. Kamara has, that one game was a blowout, so whatever, but he has 32.
Right. We're still dealing with small samples here, but clearly a workhorse in Alvin Kamara on the ground.
And touchdown plus favorites at home. I mean, come on. What do you expect to happen?
Don't overthink it.
Cleveland at Minnesota. Here it comes, Matt. I love Odell Beckham this week. Okay. I do. Absolutely love him this week. Last week, first game back from an ACL tear, hadn't been on the field since week 7 of 2020. He said he couldn't get his legs underneath him the whole game. He lost his voice without even screaming, that he was just absolutely toast after that game. And he still looked good. He still looked good. He had 3 targets of 20 plus yards downfield. Baker loves the deep ball to Odell Beckham. Jarvis Landry's out. Minnesota's allowing over 10 yards per attempt to opposing passers. The secondary's been torched. I'm telling you, man, Odell Beckham's going to get the opportunity here. He had a 30% target share in that first game back. Like, everything lines up for him to get a lot of opportunity. And I'm going to be going to him this week. What are you doing with Cleveland?
Yeah, I really like Cleveland. And, let's talk about just the slate in general for a minute, because this is such a good time to bring this fact up. Most of the time, we see ownership projections and the actual ownership on Sundays coalesce around the highest Vegas total games of the week. That makes perfect sense, because high Vegas totals means lots of points scored and lots of fantasy points scored. So it's advantageous for us to look at that next tier, that second tier of Vegas totals that are just below the highest total game of the week, and see if we can find some great players that might be going overlooked here. And what's really exciting this week is that we have a couple of really high secondary Vegas totals over 50 points, and they're in domes, and they're with teams that happen to love to pass the ball. With Minnesota, of course, they're going to lean on their rushing attack as well. But with Cleveland here, I think they're going to find themselves in a shootout, and it's very obvious who is going to have to get them back in that type of game environment. It's Odell Beckham. He was 12th among wide receivers in expected fantasy points last week. I'm really encouraged by the overall usage. And, I think he said his shoulder popped out and had to pop it back in. He came out late.
And then when they asked him about it, he just, and I quote, "Yeah, it's football stuff." That's what he said, which is great.
Hey, there's lots of valid criticisms about Odell Beckham. The Browns being worse without him, with him not in the game, is incorrect. And him not being, or him being a sissy or something like that, that's incorrect. The dude plays through it. So I'm absolutely fine going to Odell Beckham, especially when you talk about his ownership projection being under 8% right now, outside the top 15 wide receivers. I think it's very unlikely that there are 15 wide receivers in a better game environment and projection-based spot than Odell Beckham. So I really like that. Nick Chubb, What can you say about the guy? Great running back, really tough to play in tournaments. The one thing I will say is it's a game theory choice for Chubb where you can say great player, high game total, under 3% projected ownership. In that case, I'm fine with Chubb. The projection compared to salary-based expectation doesn't look so great.
Yeah. For me, it's Beckham. I like the most on this team, for sure. And you brought up a lot of good points on him as well. When you get peppered as much as he does and downfield as much as he does, he had as many targets, 20 plus yards downfield as any other receiver or tight end had in the game at all, of any distance. I love it. And Baker Mayfield loves him. And everyone wants to remember 2 years ago where Baker Mayfield had no idea what he was doing and couldn't connect deep, even though we would throw to him all the time. Everyone just wants to remember the last year, and everyone wants to forget about how good he can be. So, Jordan, do me a favor. Can you answer that question from Kevin? Given the restrictions, sponsorship, I can't talk about that. What about Minnesota, Matt? They've been involved in some shootouts.
Yeah, I'm ready to roll with this team, and you know exactly where the opportunity is coming from. I know KJ Osborne last week was popping in optimizer runs as one of the better value plays, but I think there is a little bit of variance, a little bit of noise there, and we can safely say that by far the best plays on the Vikings continue to be Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and when he's healthy, Dalvin Cook. It was really encouraging to see Alexander Mattison tear up a Seattle rushing defense that honestly should be torn up in a shootout type environment, and he had a huge game filling in for the injured Cook. I'm assuming right now that Cook does come back. If he does, I expect a full workload. It's really encouraging that he got in limited work already this week, which is very different than last week when he didn't practice at all. But as I mentioned in our PrizePicks segment, I love both of these receivers. I don't really care that their projections are a little bit worse than salary-based expectations because I think that the game environment is going to help prop them up. Justin Jefferson, I mean, he's just one of the best receivers in the league, number 6 in expected fantasy points, scoring over expected, but on a sustainable level at 0.7 fantasy points over expected per game. Usually that just means you're good. So when you're talking about high Vegas total, pass-friendly environment, number 1 wide receiver, I'm absolutely fine getting to Justin Jefferson's 7,300 salary this week. And you know what? I'm done betting against Thielen too. Such an obvious regression candidate, 5.8 fantasy points over expected per game. I'm not betting on it anymore. Maybe it goes a little bit lower than that. The dude is just efficient.
You said it all. There's not much more I need to say. Both of those guys every week make for great stack candidates. And Thielen's touchdown, like how do you bet? Like you said, how do you bet against Thielen getting in the end zone anymore? You can't do it. Isn't this the guy who 2 years ago broke the record for most consecutive games with a touchdown?
Yeah, and I think he had the second most end zone targets behind Devontae Adams last year. Let's just stop overthinking things. Yeah. And Kirk Cousins looks for one. I remember this too. Do you remember when Amari Cooper was on the Raiders and Derek Carr just threw the ball to Michael Crabtree in the end zone over and over and over and over again? No one had a higher touchdown rate during that time except for Antonio Brown,
who is incredible. So, yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I just was curious, and then we'll move on. How many red zone targets Thielen has seen this year? Take a guess.
Red zone targets?
Yeah, how many red zone targets do you think Thielen's seen this year?
7.
Okay. Yeah, he's seen 4. Okay. But still, 2 of them at the goal line, 3 inside the 10, 4 touchdowns already. Insane efficiency. He's good. He's good. And hey, let's be clear about something. It's not just like he's only getting red zone targets. He has more receptions than Justin Jefferson and 26 targets to Jefferson's 30. So he's still getting a lot of looks, But yeah,
when you get targeted by the goal line, you know what you can't get is air yards because
exactly
one air yard to get. So Jefferson does outpace it.
Do you think this game could shoot out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you told me at the end of the Sunday slate that this ended up going the most over its expected total, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
I hear you. Makes for a fun one, dude. Especially if if you did stack Minnesota with that Odell run back. Nice. All right, let's talk about Washington and Atlanta. Washington secondary has just been torched. It's been bad, Matt. And then Atlanta, Matt Ryan's pretty much toast at this point. We've gotten that notification over the past 3 weeks. It's pretty evident now, but I don't know. I mean, this game to me, and I talked about it. I was on with your guys Noonan and Connor Allen yesterday on the 4for4 betting show. Check out Matt's work over there as well for the fantasy football side, or DFS side. Sorry. This is one of those games where either the defenses are just so bad, or the offenses are so bad. Like, I could see this game going over by 20 points, like we saw Washington and New York, or I could see it going under by 15 points. I really don't have a good read on this from a game flow standpoint.
Yeah, and I think that's probably true. It's probably, if you played this game over 100 times, if you simulated it over and over, you'd probably see what the statisticians call a bimodal effect, where you had a lot of games that were very low and a lot of games that went well over here. I don't know if there's so many that fall right in the middle, but when you average them all out, the 50th percentile shows this pretty middling 47.5 Vegas total this week. Now, both offenses, you have to say for Atlanta, it was really in 2020 we saw it, but both offenses with similar personnel have shown the ability to play in shootouts. With Washington, it was just week 2, and we were all encouraged about Taylor Heineke. That's sort of fizzled a little bit, especially with that poor performance against the Bills in week 3. But I'm still fine going to Antonio Gibson. His projections do outpace his salary-based expectations. And even though there has been so much talk about J.D. McKissic getting so much work, I think Gibson only has 2 targets on 3rd or 4th down this season. It's basically going all to McKissic. He's still top 16 amongst running backs in expected fantasy points. And we saw him. He doesn't need a ton of usage to break a long run. I do love playing players like that in games that could shoot out well over their Vegas total. But the thing that really shocks me is basically that one big play touchdown is making his expected ownership really high this week. I guess it's just the salary savings that you get. You don't see a lot of players at 6,100 like him. So that leads me to Terry McLaurin, one of the best projections compared to salary this for any player, let alone wide receiver. You're not going to be alone, 9.3% expected ownership, but he's definitely my favorite player on the Washington side.
With that, I absolutely agree with you, hands down. Terry McLaurin at, what's his ownership right now?
Just over 9%.
Yeah, that's really nice, especially given that Atlanta's secondary has been their biggest problem too, and they're not generating much of a pass rush. I'll say this with Gibson though. You're absolutely right that last week his production was skewed by this. I did a start sit video. I think I mentioned it at the top of the show, maybe on the morning show. No, it was this show because we talked about Taylor and Gaskin. And I said that you have to start Gibson this week, but if you were thinking that you got bailed out last week and that things are looking upwards for Gibson because of what he did in the passing game, you would be mistaken. There's, 1 of 2 targets was a reception for 73 yards and a beautiful touchdown. That does not negate all of the issues there. However, he has 87% of the running back carries in this offense this year. 87%. He is still the clear bell cow. They were in a really negative game script last week. In week 1, Antonio Gibson saw 20 carries, okay, and 25 total touches. 25 total looks. If this game does play out where it's close and neither team really gets anything going to the extent where they're trashing the other team, or maybe Washington trashes Atlanta, that would be good. I still think Antonio Gibson's volume is going to be significant. So New York was a weird game. And then Buffalo, they were down by like 30 or whatever it was. It was never even remotely close. It's only been 3 weeks. It's a small sample sport and small sample size thus far. He still saw 20 carries in week 1 in a loss and is still the clear guy that's going to get the large majority of running back opportunities in the ground game if this game is close. That's what I would say as a devil's advocate here, Matt.
Oh, I agree. I definitely think that the fact that his ownership is creeping up there towards the top 5 running backs is totally understandable here. I don't want to overthink it because more blow up performances on DraftKings and FanDuel have come from home favorites than road favorites. I don't want to overthink it that much, but Gibson, a great player on a team that is very low in our top stacks probability rating, meaning our passing expectation for them is pretty middling. Just play the most talented player in the running back core, and that's Antonio Gibson by a mile.
For sure. All right. On the Atlanta side, Kyle Pitts has seen a 13 and 8% target share over the last 2 weeks. Not great. And Calvin Ridley, as talented as he is, and he's been fine, but not great. Matt Ryan is really hamstringing his production this season. So what do you do with him and Mike Davis and Cordarrelle Patterson? I'll let you take the lead here, Matt. Go ahead.
Yeah, holy smokes. I mean, I'm so disappointed in this Atlanta offense. Just from a volume standpoint, they usually you're able to project just Matt Ryan's pass volume to be high enough where we can generally say that he can support 2 wide receivers, but now we're asking ourselves, can he even support 1? Minus 3.4 fantasy points below expectation per game. That's 20th amongst quarterbacks just on this slate. Again, there are only 26 at that position starting. So I'm just super disappointed in all these options. And then when you talk about this time share between Mike Davis and Cordarrelle Patterson in the running game, almost no players are usable in this offense. Calvin Ridley is probably better than his 7,000 salary dictates on DraftKings. He probably is better than that. And so I understand why he's seeing almost 12% ownership this week. He does look like a solid value play. But man, Kyle Pitts, seen a few highlight plays, but still 6th amongst all tight ends in expected fantasy points, but that's just 9.6 expected points. The idea that you're getting a tournament winning score from Pitts seems a whole lot lower than we thought a couple weeks ago.
It's unfortunate with 2 really, really talented skill players that you don't really want to target them.
Hey, if it's going to happen any week, it's against Washington.
Yeah.
Suddenly looks like, 1, a pass funnel defense, like you don't really want to run on them. And that's certainly not the strength of the Falcons offense in general. And 2, there's only one team right now giving up more schedule adjusted fantasy points to opposing offenses than the Washington football team. So if Atlanta can't do it here, where are they doing it?
Right. And Kyle Pitts, I think, is a good large field tournament play, but I don't think you can go to him anywhere else given the target share right now. And that's a concern. But in large field tournaments, these guys do make sense to me. And I just don't feel comfortable stacking with Matt Ryan because I don't know if he can support 2 good performances right now. I really don't. We'll see. This game will be pretty telling though, Matt.
No, absolutely. With both defenses below average in fantasy points allowed, if we don't see production here, we're just comfortable saying these are pretty mediocre offenses.
So let's talk about San Francisco and Seattle. These NFC West divisional matchups are always kind of tough to handicap, but we have seen some high scoring totals between these teams. The Niners are 1.5 point favorites at home, 52 point total. Seattle, I mean, this has not been a start that you're looking for the Seattle Seahawks when you look at them from a number of different levels. Now, Russell Wilson is still very good. Take nothing away from him. DK Metcalf is a stud. So is Tyler Lockett. Chris Carson's good. They've lost 2 straight, though, to Tennessee. And then Minnesota, that offense really sputtered. I still think this game could shoot out. I also wouldn't be surprised. I'm not trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth here, but this is kind of how these divisional matchups go. I also wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 20-17 game either. But when it comes to Wilson and Metcalf and Lockett and Carson, how do you approach this?
Yeah, and how are we not supposed to talk about range of outcomes without saying something along the lines of, well, it could be this or it could be that. Right. So I don't give you any fault.
You're
there.
Playing for it to be one or the other, but you don't know.
We just talk in terms of probabilities, right? This is the most likely thing to happen, but especially when we start talking about tournaments and larger field tournaments, we need to start thinking about the third, the fourth, the fifth way these games play out. Because if you play a lineup that plays the same way that game script plays out and you're all alone, that's when you have life-changing performances in DFS.
Yep.
So with the Seattle offense, the biggest thing is the quality of their division, and things could get out of hand in a hurry here, especially if they disappoint this week. They're 1-2, as you mentioned. They're -4 in point differential, but their division is stacked. Both LA and Arizona have started the year 3-0. Say what you want about their difference in schedule toughness, but LA is 33 points over their opponents in point differential. Arizona is 38 points over their points in point differential. And San Francisco is no slouch either at +12 right now. So, I mean, this Russell Wilson led offense is still one that I want to bet on. It's in terms of top stacks probability. They're not blowing us out of the water, though. 7th in our value ranking this week. Wilson has been efficient as usual, 8 fantasy points over expected per game. But just like these Pete Carroll offenses of the past, 22nd in expected fantasy points. Not a high-powered offense, except for Wilson's continued general efficiency. So I'm fine with DK Metcalf if you want to spend up for him. It doesn't look like many people are going to get there with his high salary this week. So, just for a player coming off a huge performance, I'm fine with it there. Tyler Lockett, we are starting to see the variance that he's always been known for, but remember, that's with the wide receiver position in general. And honestly, it's Chris Carson who's really appealing to me, who has a projection just right in line with salary-based expectation. But I think the ownership is a little bit low for a player who should see 20, 25 touches in this game.
Okay. And Gerald Everett on the COVID-19 list, so it's possible he doesn't play. On the other side of this one, we could be getting Elijah Mitchell back. It's pretty evident that Shanahan really doesn't trust Trey Sermon right now. That's why Juszczyk got,
Yes.
legitimate opportunities in that game, which was good because it saved me from a pretty bad main slate. But, Juszczyk had 5 carries and 4 targets. You won't see that if Mitchell returns, but it's a backfield that, for all intents and purposes, I have no reason to go there this week. No idea what's going to happen with that backfield if Mitchell returns. Even if he doesn't, too many games to choose from, too many other good options. But Matt, I actually like George Kittle a lot. He's sub 6K. And when you look at some of the numbers, this guy is such a monster. Shanahan would be foolish not to use him more. He's second in yards per route run at tight end behind only Travis Kelce. He's second in yards after the catch per reception among every pass catcher behind only Rondell Moore, who has that because, well, he's good, but also from just missed tackles and busted coverage. George Kittle is as good as you think he is, probably better. He's amazing, man. He's a beast, and he needs to be utilized more. We saw last week, he saw his highest target total of the season with 9. He will start getting red zone targets. Eventually, you're going to get him in the end zone. But anytime I can get a tight end at this price that can rack up insane yards after the catch and shed tackles, I love it. Not to mention, Tyler Conklin trashed Seattle for 7 for 70 and a score last week, and they haven't faced any good tight ends yet. They've faced, Tennessee, Minnesota, the Colts with Jack Doyle. I think this could be that real breakout game for the 2021 season for George Kittle, and hopefully I'm going to be there for it.
Ooh, I dig that call. Now, the Seahawks defense has been a problem. Using that same metric again, schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. They are tied for 3rd worst in the NFL with the Giants. They have been a liability, to say the least. And you have to believe that Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco offense is going to have something prepared for their division rivals here. I don't know how you don't see Deebo Samuel as anything but one of the best values on this slate here with, a wide receiver 13 salary, 6,500. Meanwhile, his 17 expected fantasy points per game ranks 11th among all wide receivers here. And he's been efficient on that opportunity, 2.9 fantasy points over expected per game. I think Deebo Samuel could smash his wide receiver 13 salary. So clearly we're liking the San Francisco passing attack. Then maybe Jimmy Garoppolo looks like a quality start. I still hate playing Garoppolo, or any of these quarterbacks who have a threat of one of their quarterbacks coming in at the goal line and vulturing a touchdown, I absolutely hate that. But his projections compared to salary-based expectations, they do look really solid.
Hey, Robert West and SN Wrist. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the support here. Almost at 150 likes, too. We are over 500 concurrent, Matt. We're almost at the end of the show, but we power through this. And, well, all of you guys that are sticking with us throughout this, it's awesome, man. Marathon show. We just keep going and making it happen. I love it. Matt, anything else for San Francisco?
Yeah, there's always that one auxiliary player that seems to get a score here. Last week, it was Kyle Juszczyk getting real usage. That was really the slant that you wanted to play in DFS, as you mentioned before. But I still think Brandon Ayuk's day is coming where he gets a ton of usage. If you want to play him at low expected ownership, that's fine. But the opportunity numbers in general do not look great.
All right. T.O. Deck, by the way, who's one of our loyal viewers here and a friend of the show, says, I wanted to comment about him, but I don't know how to spell his name. He was talking about Kyle Juszczyk, and that is a tough name. That is a tough name to spell. It really.
I almost don't want to write about Kyle Juszczyk because then I have to write the word Juszczyk so often. No,
could you spell it right now? Do you think?
I'm staring at the name, so it's a little bit of a cheap shot.
All right, tell me if I get this right. I don't. JUSCZYK?
Really close. ZCZYK. You said CZ.
Oh, right. Okay. What a crazy name.
Not an everyday name.
Must be Italian. All right.
I don't think it is.
I'm kidding.
Oh.
God. Come on, man.
I was just going to let it go.
I mean, if I had to guess, probably Polish, but it's one of those Eastern European, probably not from Sicily. All right. Arizona and the LA Rams. Let's jump into this one. The Rams are legit. I mean, they are just really dominant offensively. Matthew Stafford's got to be the happiest guy alive. First of all, you get out of living in Detroit. I mean, no offense to any of you guys. Listen, I'd say the same about a lot of different places. But now you live in the warm weather of California. Now, politically, I may have some disagreements out there, but the climate's nice, okay? Matt, when it comes to this game, Arizona has really struggled against, or Murray, they've struggled against the Rams. You already said this is a very, 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 very difficult matchup for Kyler Murray. But at the same time, is there enough shootout potential here for you to get there and feel decent about it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Just the quality of the offense and just the quality of the quarterback play. Kyler Murray he could possibly have one of the best seasons that we've seen from a quarterback in a long time here, just because what he can do is, I believe he could have a 2019 Lamar Jackson type season here, especially in this division where he's going to be needed to score points all the time. And, put away a one-game sample where they're playing a team like the Jaguars. When they're playing a high-quality offense on the other side like the Rams, I think you're going to see Cliff Kingsbury's offense focused around getting Kyler Murray to create chunk plays, whether that's through the air or with his legs. So I absolutely love Murray. What's really interesting here is that the projected ownership looks really low for him right now. I think that's because other players at the quarterback position at his salary tier have just naturally better looking matchups. But the Rams, if you look at schedule adjusted fantasy points, they're actually bottom 10 in the league, giving up 13 points more than the average defense in fantasy points, more so than average. So that's a below average defense by that grade. Now, we know all about the talent. We know all about their ability last year. They were basically number one in every metric we looked at. But because of the style of their offensive play, the opposing offense is essentially forced to pass a lot and try to score a lot, which makes the Cardinals a really easy bet and great run back options if you play the Rams.
Yeah. The only tough part is, well, who did you say was a great run back option? I'm sorry.
I said the Cardinals in general, and I do have a player other than DeAndre Hopkins for you.
You do?
I can't believe I'm saying it.
AJ Green.
But I'm just trusting the numbers and saying AJ Green.
Let's hear it, baby.
He's got expected fantasy points up over 11. That's right in line with salary-based expectations at 4,500. And we saw him be one of the most inefficient players in fantasy points versus expectation last year. Really, really surprised to see him over that zero threshold, now right near 0.5 fantasy points scored over expectation. Obviously, Rondale Moore with that high yards after catch, he's over expectation as well. But he's really tough to bet on because of his lack of just general snap share. AJ Green is getting enough usage, and he's been remotely efficient on it, and he's seeing no ownership in this high total game. You can go there in tournaments.
I like it. And maybe AJ Green isn't totally washed because he didn't appear that way last week. Do you think Hopkins faces a lot of Ramsey and is still ailing from that rib injury where it's basically pain management?
Yeah, I do. And also they use him, Hopkins that is, on the left side of, I haven't checked his routes run data this year yet, but over the course of 2020, it was very uncreative where they lined up Hopkins. Not to say he didn't run all types of routes from the left side, but he was lined up at the left side the whole time, which if you do have a shadow corner like Jalen Ramsey, makes it a lot easier. You just stick him over there and keep him there the whole time. But the big thing we need to talk about is just the quality of the offense and the efficiency of the offense led by Kyler Murray, just like we did with, I believe it was the Jets. Listen to these fantasy points versus expectation for the Cardinals skill players. Hopkins, 5.3 over expectations. Kirk, 5.2 over expectation per game. Rondale Moore, 2.7 over expected per game. That is a really good indicator that your quarterback is on fire.
I like it. Hopkins lining up 50% on the left side, 50% on the right this year.
Oh, there you go. They switched that up. I like to see it.
Yep. I'm getting that from PFF. So yeah. All right. On the Rams side, Cooper Kupp's a stud, man. He's an absolute stud. He's seen double-digit targets in 3 straight games. I was talking to Noonan and Connor about this yesterday on the betting show too, Matt. It's like he had a receptions prop of 6.5 with juiced at -140. And at first we're all like, yeah, that's a lot. And then you realize this guy could be a 10 reception guy. I mean, it's insane how much he's targeted, how easily he gets open, and how high efficient, how much of these targets are such high efficiency, but he also gets that 1 or 2 deep balls a game. He gets the red zone targets every game. He's not going to be under-owned because Cooper Kupp, even at this price point, is going to appeal to people. What was his ownership? Last I looked, it was still up there. Maybe it came down a bit. Yeah, it's still up there.
16.3, yeah.
Still up there. And the reason is, even at this price point, it's pretty easy to make the argument still that with this volume against an Arizona secondary that hasn't been massively tested yet, that there's a lot to like about him. It's just a matter of ownership and will Robert Woods finally get involved and all of that stuff that plays into it. But Matt, check this out. Cooper Kupp already has 7 red zone targets, 2 goal line targets, and 4 inside the 10. That's insane. It's insane.
It's awesome. And we're not saying that Cooper Kupp has anything. He could literally be the top scoring player, skill player in all of fantasy football. That is in his range of outcomes this year. But he's naturally going to deal with the variance of the wide receiver position. Right now, 9.4 fantasy points over expected per game. I'm not saying that it's going to come down to even 0 fantasy points over expected per game by the end of the year. I think he's going to be incredibly efficient, but that's just an unsustainable amount of fantasy points over expected. But let me give you the catch. He's number 1 at the position in expected fantasy points per game. Just telling you the idea of being the most efficient or second most efficient wide receiver in terms of outperforming expectation on the highest expected value at the position. Truly, truly elite usage here. And especially when you talk about a running game where there's a lot of uncertainty about who's going to be starting this week, and Robert Woods clearly having usage that's more variable than Kupp. what is there to say? You missed the train of getting him at anything but really high ownership, but that doesn't make him anything but a bad play. Oh, excuse me, anything but a good play here. He's a fantastic play if you can fit him in at a 7,800 salary. I'm not afraid of Robert Woods either. Yes, he did have a disappointing performance, especially compared to Kupp last week, but he's in a decent matchup this week. The Arizona defense has been just above league average in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing offenses. I'm going to go with Vegas here, say this is a high implied total. Happy to play a player with inside the top 25 and expected fantasy points in this game environment.
Cooper Kupp leads the entire league in target share, 38.2%. Amazing, even higher than Brandon Cooks. But Brandon Cooks at week 2 and 3 has got to be like 50-some%. Brandon Cooks has a 57.3% team air yard share. Come on, man. Debo's at 53, but Cooper Kupp, 37.3% of team air yards. For a receiver like that and leading the team in target share or league in target share, you got to love it. I'm with you on Woods. He burned me a bit last week, but I mean, at this point, you got to try and keep going back because eventually he's going to have a game. He still has 15 targets over the last 2 weeks. There will be that game. It will happen in a dynamic, explosive offense, and hopefully I'm there for it. All right, Matt, 2 games to go, and then we will see our way out of here. Also, free content on Awesemo.com today. If you're not ready to sign up, become a premium sub. MLB main slate ownership projections, still happening, baby. They're free. And all of the NFL showdown rankings for tonight's slate are free at Awesemo.com. So head over there and check them out while you're at it. All right, Baltimore and Denver. Denver laying a point at home. Should be a competitive game. They've had like the easiest schedule for sure. No doubt about it. Easiest schedule. But this defense, I believe this defense is legitimately good. And even against better teams, they're still going to, allow some points. I think this is a very good defense. I can see this game being relatively low scoring. I don't love this on either side for fantasy this week.
Yeah, and I know I've mentioned it several times, this schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed metric to try to measure defenses and how well an opposing offense will do. But again, schedule adjusted, that's a very important first term there because the Broncos are still number 1 in the NFL in that ranking. And I'm looking at it going, well, how much do you schedule adjust? Because darn, their initial schedule has been real easy. But that said, that's nothing to scoff at there. And remember, Vic Fangio, their head coach, was the defensive guru of the Chicago Bears just a few years ago and has arguably as good or better personnel that he's working with right now on that side of the ball. And here's something that's really interesting. The Baltimore offense has been one of the more advantageous offenses for opposing fantasy defenses. So if you say that the Denver defense is extremely talented, maybe even when you adjust for their schedule, maybe the most talented defense in the league. And the fact that Baltimore doesn't win with a lot of yardage, they don't need a lot of points, and they have been fairly turnover prone to start the season, that could be a recipe for having a pay up to be contrarian situation at defense for Denver. I'm not saying totally fade the Ravens offense or that is the most likely outcome here. But I'm saying that if you just take away the name brand of Lamar Jackson and the Ravens and the fact that the Denver defense wasn't considered very special to go into the season, the numbers bear out that it's looking kind of good.
That is certainly an interesting thought. Okay. I like it. Man, Lamar Jackson, what do you think his deep ball percentage is this season? Like, would you think it's high, low, average?
Oh, I think it's very high, actually. I think he's close to the league lead in yards per attempt.
So the deep ball percentage for you guys that are wondering is what percent of his overall passing attempts are 20 plus yards downfield? Lamar Jackson is far and away the highest percentage quarterback on deep attempts this year. 22% of his passes have been deep balls. Now, granted, low passing volume offense, so take that with context, but 19 attempts have traveled 20 plus yards downfield. And I'll say if Marquise Brown didn't drop those yet last week, he might have tacked on 2 or 3 more touchdowns in that category as well. But here's this is amazing. Guess who's second, Matt?
Ooh, Russell Wilson?
Teddy Bridgewater.
Get out of here.
I swear, Teddy Bridgewater has the second highest deep ball percentage at 18.9%. 18 deep balls on the year. Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, that's
gloves.
Crazy.
Wow.
So,
go ahead.
Like, is there possibility for some big monster plays in this game? I mean, maybe defense wins out, but I just thought that's funny that the two guys with the highest deep ball percentage are in the same game, and you would never expect Teddy Bridgewater to be that guy.
Yeah, man. I guess there is shootout potential here, but just talking about, late swap options, we have two super high Vegas totals in the late games with Arizona, LA, and Seattle, San Francisco. So I don't see a huge need to hold out my roster spots for Baltimore and Denver, save for one player maybe. I'd rather have more information heading into those big games in the afternoons. So if I'm doing well, I'll late swap to some more contrarian plays. Or if I'm not doing well, I'll swap to some contrarian plays. Maybe that includes this game. But I'd rather have more info at the 1 p.m. So if I don't need to go there, I won't.
I'm with you, but just to be clear, I just thought those are crazy stats on a guy that has been pretty conservative. But yeah, I'm with it. Maybe you get a couple shots of guys like Sutton, but I don't love that spot. And maybe I think you can get away from it. So let's close it out with Pittsburgh and Green Bay. And please shout out your boy Jordan Klein. Throw him a $500 super chat for producing this show, because 2-hour show. He did the earlier one. How many shows are you doing today in total? 5? Okay. You're producing 5. I'm doing 3. So never mind. Super chat me. Anyway, no, thank Jordan though. He does a great job behind the scenes. Pittsburgh and Green Bay, wrapping it up with this one, Matt. Pittsburgh basically gave up last game. They're 6.5-point dogs. And if you can get it at 6.5, I like Green Bay there. Just win by a touchdown. That's solid. You don't want to bet them at 7.5, but 6.5. I'll lay the points at Lambeau with Green Bay. I just have no confidence in Pittsburgh right now. And you draft a first-round running back without doing anything to bolster your offensive line. And now you have to target him 19 times in a game against the Cincinnati Bengals, who you have beat up upon for years on end. Times are changing in Pittsburgh. It doesn't look good for them. Deontay Johnson, who knows what you're going to get out of him this week if he plays at all. He did practice in a limited capacity. And then Juju Smith-Schuster didn't practice at all on Wednesday. It's ugly. It's really ugly in Pittsburgh right now for the skill positions.
Yeah, I first looked at this Vegas game total and I was like, whoa, that is a low total for Packers and Steelers.
Right.
And then I realized, wait a minute, from an implied total standpoint, the Packers are holding their end of the bargain up. They're right around 26, 27 points. It's the Steelers that there is no faith whatsoever in this offense from the books here. And how can you blame them? The Steelers have just been completely inept so far this season, and now you're dealing with massive injuries all over the field. If you compare, these elder statesman quarterbacks, Tom Brady in Tampa Bay has one of the lowest pressure rates in the league. So even though he gets the ball out fairly quickly, he has time to check for his receivers downfield. With the Steelers, they have one of the highest pressure rates allowed in the league, and they have absolutely no mobility from the quarterback position with Ben Roethlisberger back there. So now you're talking about no wide receivers available. They're going to be dumping it down to these tight ends and these running backs all day long, and that is not a recipe for fantasy success. If you want to go to a player like Eric Ebron or Pat Freiermuth in a large field tournament or something like that, sure, go ahead and spin the roulette wheel. But Najee Harris is the only player who we can project solid usage for. Chase Claypool, he's going to see Jair Alexander, so maybe even if he looks like fine on paper, does that really excite you, especially if he's really the only option that Alexander needs to worry about? So then the last piece here, does James Washington resurrect himself here in a large field tournament? Sure. This is just not a team I need to go to.
It's not fun. And with Chase Claypool, if Ben had more time in the pocket, it might be a little bit more intriguing because Claypool can make those contested catches downfield. But I don't know if Ben's going to have the time in the pocket. A quick release, and that's why Juju was getting peppered with targets before because there was nothing else there. Anyway, Matt, Are you producing the odds show, Jordan? You are. All right. So we got to get out of here.
All right.
Jordan, again, just show to show. Green Bay, let's wrap it up with this. I'll give you my quick thoughts. It'll take 10 seconds. I love Aaron Rodgers. I love Devontae Adams. I love this skinny stack a lot this week with the two of them. And I think you could probably do it without a run back. The Steelers secondary has looked way worse than anyone could have ever imagined. And I think they get trounced by Rodgers and Devontae Adams this week at home. Close us out.
Yep, it's hard to get to Rodgers' salary, QB8 right now, but that's why you're seeing his ownership really projected quite low at the moment, which makes him all the more appealing. Totally dig the skinny stack option. Marcus Valdes-Scantling, too, as a secondary receiver, has been one of the least efficient secondary receivers in the league. So even in this offense, he's nothing but a large field tournament. Devontae Adams hasn't even performed that much higher than expectation. He's ranked second in expected fantasy points among wide receiver. He's definitely my favorite play on the Green Bay side. And I'm fine with Aaron Jones right at running back for projection right in line with salary-based expectation.
There it is. Follow Matt at Draftaholic. Myself at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. And before you head out, if you didn't hit that thumbs up, maybe we could get to 200 by the time this stream is over. That would be great. Do it for me. Do it for Jordan. Do it for Matt. Do it for everybody in chat. It's a collective effort, and we'll all be better people for it. Subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 60K. And we'll catch you back here tomorrow on the Strategy Show, Saturday. And then it all culminates with a 4-hour live stream, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern, leading up to lock on Sunday. Hopefully you'll join us. Until then, peace.
See ya.